So we have a article here from morningconsult.com. Morning Consult is a polling company, and they kind of ask questions, I guess, and then put the polls out there and just inform people on those kind of things regarding where the country is on different various issues. In this case, they are talking about how Medicare-for-all, majority of the people in this country back Medicare-for-all, replacing private plans as long as the preferred providers stay. So let's check this article out, and then we'll basically discuss it as we go along. So it says majority backs Medicare-for-all replacing private plans if preferred providers stay. That's the title. The subtitle says, reduced support for single payer overcome by assurance that Americans would not lose their doctor and hospital. And it's got a couple bullet points here. It says 55% of voters back a Medicare-for-all system that diminishes the role of private insurers if they retain access to their preferred providers. Independents are 14 points more likely to back the system when told losing their private plan would not mean losing their doctor, 42% to 56%. So here's the article here. It says, Though the dividing line between Democratic presidential candidates on Medicare for All concerns the elimination of the private insurance market, new Morning Consult data suggests that anxiety among voters may be misplaced fear about losing their providers rather than their private plans. According to a Morning Consult Politico survey conducted after the first Democratic presidential debates, support among voters for Medicare for All falls to 46% from 53% when respondents are told the government-run system would diminish the role of private insurers, but rises back to 55% when voters learn that losing their private plans would still allow them to keep their preferred doctors and hospitals. Between the forums last Wednesday and Thursday, only 4 of the 20 candidates on stage said they were in favor of abolishing private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and Senators Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Kamala Harris later partially and Kamala Harris. So those are the 4. Bill de Blasio, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris. Then it says Harris later partially modified her position, stating she misheard the question and believes private plans should continue offering supplemental coverage alongside the federal system, as would be the case under Sanders' Medicare for All plan. Let's see, quoting, who's this quoting? It's quoting Bernie Sanders responding. I guess he sent an email to Morning Consult, which is the polling company. He says, these numbers only affirm what the senator has said many times. People don't like insurance companies. They like their doctors and their hospitals. Sanders' campaign said of the data in the email to Morning Consult. Despite what the pharmaceutical and insurance industries tell you, Medicare for All is the only proposal that gives Americans the freedom to control their own futures, change jobs, start a family, start a business, and keep their doctor. Several polls have demonstrated that support for Medicare for All plummets when Americans learn the system would replace employer-sponsored coverage with one sweeping plan, forcing single-payer supporters to go on the defensive to alleviate concerns from voters. But as candidates attempt to persuade voters that Medicare for All would not require diminishing the role of private insurers, further adding to confusion among the electorate about what exactly the system would entail, the new data suggests that the consequences of that argument can be mitigated by clarifying that losing private insurers would not affect access to preferred providers. The June 29th to July survey of 1,472 voters found that an explanation to be especially effective in quelling skepticism among Democrats and independents. Among independents, 56% back a Medicare-for-all system that nixes the private market but allows people to keep their doctors. A 14% increase over the share that only hears about the diminished role of private insurers. The poll had a margin error of 3 percentage points. Republicans who have not yet forgotten former President Barack Obama's promise with respect to the Affordable Care Act that if you like your health care plan, you can keep it, were mostly unmoved by the addendum. Private insurance companies have much to lose from the implementation of Medicare-for-all, leading opposition efforts on Capitol Hill and across the country alongside Republicans who have decried single-payer as a socialist takeover of healthcare. Few candidates have been frank in admitting the Medicare-for-all bills in the House and Senate would phase out private insurers over a transition period of 2 or 4 years, respectively. Other presidential hopefuls, such as Kirsten Gillibrand and former Texas Representative Beto O'Rourke, have offered broad statements in support of universal health care while insisting they would not lessen the role of insurers in the healthcare system. Previous Morning Consult polling has also indicated Americans who are against Medicare-for-all on the grounds that it would reduce the role of insurance companies, maybe inadvertently conflating their payers and providers. Among adults who said they opposed the system, 62% said they are more likely to support the plan if they could keep their doctors and hospitals. So, as I've said before with any kind of poll, you can't always take it with a grain of salt, but this is very positive. This is very positive news for Bernie Sanders. It is very positive news for the progressive movement. People, I think, no matter what, they're always going to be scared of the labels. So whenever Republicans come out there and say, this is a socialist takeover, people are going to freak out about that no matter what you do. And then again, Republicans are going to call any kind of health care that gives any kind of decent or even, I would say remotely shitty quality of health care. They're going to call it a socialist takeover, and they're going to call it socialism to one extent or another. So, when John Hickenlooper or whatever says that, we can't give the Republicans ammunition to call us socialist by pushing for so-called socialist policies. So that doesn't mean shit, because Republicans are going to call whatever the Democrats do socialism no matter what. There was an article I read, I think I covered it on this podcast, about how Mike Pence thinks. Mike Pence, who's the VP of Donald Trump, thinks that Joe Biden is a socialist and believes in socialist policies and wants to push for socialism. There was a interview that Emma Vigeland from TYT investigates, or TYT interviews or something. She works for TYT Rebel headquarters or whatever it is. She does interviews. She kind of goes around and does interviews with Trump supporters and just kind of random people in general. And she did an interview with a Trump supporter, a woman, a kind of an older boomer woman, and she was wearing a red MAGA hat and everything. And she talked about how Joe Biden is a socialist, and he believes in socialist policies, and he wants to do a socialist takeover, all that shit. And she also said that the problem with socialism is that it's all about greed, and it's all about money, and it's all about taking your money away from you, when in reality that's what capitalism is. So yeah, the woman was just completely uneducated, and she was like a typical Trump supporter, and didn't make any goddamn sense. I think she might have been from Latin America. She might have been from a Central Latin America, South America, American country, because, kind of the countries that have had like socialism and communism, in their governments essentially when they were living there. So she, could have been from Cuba. That's a possibility as well. But she was obviously seemed to be from one of those countries, because based on her accent and based on her kind of the dialect of how she was speaking, you could tell she was not born in America. But on top of that, I assume, based on what she was saying as well, because I've seen it from other people, just based on what she was saying as far as like not only her dialect and her accent and everything, but also the things that she was saying, it definitely struck me as somebody that was probably from South America. And but yeah, it's these people, they're always going to be talking about how the policies of the Democrats and the policies of Bernie Sanders are going to be socialist, and it's going to take over everything. But in reality, it's the system of the capitalists and the corporatists, as I have a book here of the from Dylan Ratigan, who's a progressive. He's a former MSNBC host, but he's a great progressive. He wrote a book about corporate communists and how corporate communists are extracting the American, the wealth of the American people and putting it into all the, at least using like tax cuts essentially, and extracting it and then putting it into the government. Well, not the government, but they're kind of funneling it through the governmental system, and obviously the corporate donors have a role in that. It's just kind of going around in kind of a circle of just like transferring it over and extracting it over from donor to donor, and corporate CEO and all these people that give money to all these candidates and stuff, and it's being extracted from the middle class through forms of tax cuts and giveaways to the big super rich and the big corporations, who then implement it into the government. Well, in this case, not the government, but into the politicians who work for the government, so that those politicians can do the policies in the government that the super rich donors and corporate donors and fundraisers want. So they're just obviously doing the bidding of those big corporate donors and big corporations and all the people that basically work for those companies. And that's the general idea of what the corporate communism that Dylan Ratigan is talking about. And that's honestly the general idea that Bernie Sanders is talking about as well. And that's something that needs to be realized, because capitalism is ultimately a system that is made to ensure the endless profit of the super rich and the endless profit of the corporations that continue to screw over regular people. So capitalism does not mean prosperity for regular people. It means prosperity for the people that have the most money. And if you don't have anything, you're not going to make it in capitalism, in a capitalist system. Now, people could talk about how, if you go and you start a small business and you work hard and you make things happen, capitalism will ultimately work for you. Okay, so if you want to talk about like highly regulated capitalism, so you want to talk about like a social democracy, which is largely what Bernie Sanders supports, I can, at least speaking for myself, I can concede that that can work to some extent, as it has in countries like Scandinavia and in France and different parts of Europe, Canada, UK and stuff. They don't have like a fully socialized, obviously communist type system. They have more of a social democracy, democratic socialist type mentality when it comes to how they run their economy and how they run their country in general. So, you can make the case that those systems work, but ultimately, even with those systems, you're going to end up with a lot of people in those countries becoming billionaires, which honestly shouldn't exist. We shouldn't have billionaires in this country. And we shouldn't have people that have so much money that they can throw it around to influence our system, which basically it is what's happening with our country here, because all those billionaires have enough money to put into our political system and influence all the politicians that are running, whether it's for president, whether it's for Senate, whether it's Congress, whatever it is, governor, everything. Even in lower state houses, even in state houses, state legislatures, all that stuff, even those people are affected. And it's, these are the people that are going to be against Medicare for all. They're going to hate Medicare for all. They're going to hate the fact that the insurance companies aren't going to have some sort of role in something. And, they're going to have a fight they're going to have a big fight, and we're going to have a big fight, but they're going to be fighting us, and we're going to fight against them as hard as possible. And, if they don't like the way, the people in Europe and all these other countries that have a good healthcare system live, then, you're basically fighting against the inevitable, and you're definitely fighting against the facts. You're fighting against the fact that the systems that are best for the people, for regular people, are those systems that involve insuring people as much as possible, but not using an insurance company who want to kick you off their plans as fast as possible and as much as possible, because they know those plans, because those insurance companies know that if the person that wants the surgery, let's say if they want to get cancer treatment, or they want to get some sort of surgery that they need very badly, whatever it is, but they know that the higher the cost of those things that need to be spent for that person, the more that insurance company has to spend, and they don't want to do it. And a lot of times they're going to kick you off their plans, and they're going to try and get any way out. They're going to try and find any way out as possible. And if it leads to your death and leads to your demise, then that's just the way it is. And that's why 45,000 people a year die every year from lack of health insurance. And it's honestly, if you're okay with that, you're just a monster, and you don't have any morals, you don't have any ethics. And all these Republicans that claim to be pro-life, they're not pro-life. If they're letting if they're letting 45,000 people die every year from lack of health care, that's every year. That's crazy. That's more than the amount of people that die from gun deaths. So, and that's already bad enough. So if you're allowing that to happen, you're not a moral person. So don't talk about being pro-life. Don't talk about how you care about your fellow man, because you clearly don't.